When it launched back in February of last year, Helldivers 2 was a viral hit, far exceeding the expectations of its publisher Sony and developer Arrowhead. These guys that made the game, Arrowhead, not some major game studio. That at launch they had only about 120 developers, which got bumped up to around 130 after the game turned out to be a massive unexpected hit. The first Helldivers game was well reviewed and had a small but dedicated fan base, but the sequel blew past all expectations and went on to sell over 12 million copies. When it finally launched on Xbox at the end of August 2025, it sold nearly 1 million copies in a single week, significantly more than it sold on PlayStation consoles during its first week back in 2024. On the same day the game arrived on Xbox, Arrowhead revealed the latest content patch for the game, maybe the most significant one yet. I'm talking about the Into the Unjust update, and it brings some missions that alter the standard gameplay of Helldivers 2 in some pretty major ways. I'm talking about venturing into randomly generated cave systems brimming with bugs and a new mission type that involves driving a mobile rig around the map, collecting oil while fighting off swarms of bugs. These missions are all set on the new hive worlds that are just about as dangerous and inhospitable as possible. For players that have in the past complained the game was getting too easy, this update is a major wake-up call. It's brutally challenging and all but requires divers to adjust their loadout to face these new threats. It's practically overwhelming, but it's meant to be. New enemies like the Dragon Roach rain down hellfire from the sky and soak up a ton of punishment. The most dangerous enemy in the game so far, the Hive Lord, was added with this update as well. The current success rates of these missions are actually pretty low, but I think, at least for now, that's the point. It's how the in-game story is meant to play out, and they want dealing with this new threat to be a big deal. Into the Unjust isn't the only major content update for Helldivers 2. Outside of all the usual war bonds and minor galactic warfare-related special major orders and limited-time mission types, the game has also seen the addition of an entire new faction called the Illuminate and the introduction of the colonies, and thus missions set on colony worlds. This all came with the Omens of Tyranny content update, which launched back in December 13th of 2024. They've been slowly expanding the Illuminate faction since they were introduced last year, and eventually led into a limited event where they invaded the heart of humanity, Super Earth itself. Also slowly expanding our subscribership, much slower than it should be. We know there's tons of you out there, and we know that you're not subscribed. What gives? I'm joking. I'm actually asking you for a big favor, that you click the subscribe button, because we appreciate it a lot. It helps us keep making these videos, and we hope it helps you see stuff you want to see. I know it's annoying, sorry, but we gotta ask. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Even though the most recent update only expands on the Terminids, it doesn't go as far as to bring in an entirely alien race. But Into the Unjust might actually be the most significant shakeup in the game's history. The cave delving missions feel unlike anything else in the game so far. These are not the same semi-open world maps that make up the rest of the game. They're congested corridors that force players to engage with the game in a challenging new way. It's an exciting bit of fresh air for a game that, at least for hardcore players, was starting to get a little stale. It seems like a major point of this entire update is to address player complaints about the lack of mission variety. Both the cave delves and the oil collection missions are just out of left field if you've been playing this game and you know what to expect at this point. They're also a really refreshing sign that the developers really are listening. And it's something that personally I would like to see more of, not just from them, but from everybody across the board. Every developer, every publisher, all of them. They've created some interesting mission variants in the past as limited time events related to the Galactic War, but these new mission types really shake up the standard Helldivers 2 experience in a way that just bringing in new enemies and terrain types doesn't. Colonies were something different to look at, sure, but these caves change things up way more than that. They're far more limiting in the way they allow you to act. Calling in stratagems is impossible when you're underground. The only places you can get support in is the spots where the caves open up and there's holes in the ceiling. You also better be sure to bring something with a flashlight because it can get very dark very quick. And while you're not really doing stuff that's super far off from any other mission, the random layouts and the added challenge of trying to get around these tunnels makes these missions especially interesting and tense. And pretty much everything added with this update is welcome, except the Dragon roaches, which are a massive pain to deal with, that basically require you to have some kind of fire protection. Now, for as much as the game has improved over the last year, it is still suffering from some issues. Stability is a major problem that needs to be addressed. It seems like performance in general has been getting way worse with every patch. The game's file size is way too big these days. It's bloated to 141 gigabytes. It's nearly as big as Baldur's Gate 3, which seems super excessive for the amount of stuff that's actually in the game versus what's in that game. The developers do seem to be aware of that problem, and they do say they intend to address the file size problem in the future, as well as work on overall stability. If they can get these two problems in check, Helldivers 2 is pretty much a perfect game. And the game's not a bad place right now, it just needs a little TLC. I know the game is made by a small-ish team for this size of a game anyway, and that it's a game that's not expected to go on forever. You buy it, you play it for a while, and then you move on. But there's a reason there's so many unlockables that are just less of a grind. It's honestly pretty easy to unlock everything you want now in Helldivers 2, in stark comparison to a lot of other online games where unlocking anything is like pulling teeth. Helldivers 2 is about having fun and not getting in your way too much, which it would pull off with flying colors if not for some persistent glitches that have plagued the game from launch, and of course the performance issues. The core here is just so good and satisfying, it's a shame that for some players, Helldivers 2 is practically unplayable. Performance is far from the only problem it's dealt with in its short lifespan. As you know, there's a whole PSN requirement snafu that not even Arrowhead, the developers, were happy about. For a little while, the biggest complaints from fans were that it felt like the devs were nerfing everything to make the game harder, which eventually led to a concerted effort for around 60 days where Arrowhead put out constant game balance updates to try to get the game to a place that everyone was satisfied with. And they're still making balance changes today, some good, some bad, but overall I think they've managed to course correct after straying a little too far from where it started in terms of difficulty. The game has gotten pretty tough, at least in the Hive World missions, but that comes from the mission design and the new enemies, and not from your guns feeling intentionally underpowered. Balance in the game is still a constant battle, but it does seem like we've chilled out a little bit lately. It's just a co-op game, so the balance shouldn't matter that much. But I do get that the devs don't want everyone just using the same high-tier weapons for absolutely everything. They want people using different things for different situations. If their goal was for people to start changing around their loadout more, they succeeded with the new update, because just using the standard weapons and stratagems, it's just not as useful here. So they've added a fair amount to Helldivers over the past year and change, but is it really a completely different game? Well, the new Delve missions definitely feel different, and they give the missions a sort of deep rock galactic vibe, but I know we kind of started off saying things were majorly different, and in a lot of ways they are, but by nature, it's mostly the same game. There's a ton of new weapons, armors, stratagems, and each of the 3 alien armies have been expanded on significantly with new enemy types that bring a lot to the table and help mix things up. And while it doesn't necessarily feel completely new, the update is definitely taking things in the right direction. There's more varied and interesting mission types that encourage you to dig deeper into your arsenal instead of just relying on old favorites, and that's exactly what this game needs. I would say that an increased speed of updates would also be nice, but it's important to look at this thing realistically. Arrowhead is not a big developer. 130 people isn't small, but think of what Helldivers is, and think of the size of the team that you would normally assign to something like this. They're not that big. And some people might say they should have taken advantage of the game's viral popularity and massively scaled up their operations so they could crank out updates at the speed of something like Fortnite. It's probably a lot safer not to do that in terms of the game's longevity and whatever comes next. And whether it is or isn't, they didn't do that. So updates are just slower. I'd like to see more things happen in the Galactic War as well. They were doing some interesting things there for a while, but it felt like they've been autopilot on that stuff, unless some major update comes along to shake things up. Those are minor complaints though, because Helldivers 2 is an excellent game, and it's in a pretty solid place right now. At this rate, I'm not sure how long the developers intend to support it, but I hope they keep big updates like the Into the Unjust 1 coming for at least a few years. If that happens, just imagine how different Helldivers 2 is going to look in another 2 or 3 years. By then, it might really be a completely different game. At least now in 2025, it's mostly the same Helldivers 2 we know and love, just with some pretty significant updates and upgrades that definitely bring overall improvement to the experience. But what do you think? Leave us a comment, let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe, don't forget to enable notifications, and thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter, @FalconTheHero. We'll see you next time, right here on Game Ranks.